All right, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Chaf Daled. We pick up with the Mishnah on the bottom of Chaf Gimel Amud Bet, and we had just heard about two women who were taken captive, and the big chiddush that although they're not believed on themselves, if we have witnesses that they were taken captive, they are believed to testify on one another, even if there's a possible concern, which the Gemara wasn't explicit about then, it'll be explicit about today, a possible concern about reciprocity. But not only that, we believe in Eid Echad, and we found out even in the Gemara that even if it's one against one aid said that she was raped, and one aid said she was not, and even if the one that's saying she's not is normally the weaker aid in terms of halacha, would let's say be a case would be a woman against a man, which in Aedus is principles is the woman's in a weaker status. Nevertheless, we always believe the one that said that she was not. So again, similar to things we've had in Yevambus, a particular leniency that we do in terms of believing the aid that says that she was not raped, even in Eid Echad, even somebody who's not normally seen as a kosher aid. We'll see more about that later. Okay, now we move on to the next Mishnah, which is a similar issue. Two men. One says that I'm a Kohen, and the other says that I'm a Kohen. Einam ne'emanim, they're not believed about themselves. If we didn't already have a chazaka, have a tradition and an established assumption that they were a Kohen, and therefore we don't give them truma. Okay, because they're coming to the threshing floor, and they're saying, they're coming to the threshing floor, and they're saying, give me the truma. So he says, well, how would I know you're a Kohen? Well, I say I'm a Kohen, so we don't believe it. But similar to what we found out by the women who are captives, if they testify about one another, the two of them show up at the threshing floor and they both say he's a Kohen. He says he's a Kohen, so give us both truma. So again, that's a case that you could be concerned about some type of a collusion. Nevertheless, Harei Elu Ne'emanim, they are believed in order to give them truma. So that's the chiddush is number one, that you believe in Eid Echad, that somebody is a Kohen for the purposes of truma, and number two is that you believe it even in possibilities where there's issues of collusion or reciprocity going on here. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein malin lekahuna al pi eid echad." No, kahuna you don't trust based on one witness. Okay, so it's not good enough. I'm Rabbi Eliezer. Amasai. When is this true? When would I concede Rabbi Yehuda's point that one witness would not be good? If there is an actual concrete challenge raised against this person's kahuna status. If there's no concrete challenge, we just don't know what this person's identity is. You could marry off, raise somebody to assume somebody is a Kohen on the basis of one witness. Okay, so now we have three opinions. One that's not clear, that says you believe in Eid Echad. The position of Rabbi Yehuda that says, did I skip the line, by the way? No, I didn't. Rabbi Yehuda who says that you do not, and you do not trust in Eid Echad, and Rabbi Eliezer that reiterates what the Tanna Kama says and says that you do. However, he concedes that if there's a concrete challenge raised against the person, you do not. The Gemara will assume that Rabbi Eliezer might not concede the case of, not only does he not concede the case when there's Orin, he might not concede the case when there are two of them showing up and there's a concern of collusion. He might only accept an Eid Echad in a standard case, but not in the special case of the Tanna Kama. Let's finish the Mishnah, where there is where two of them show up and they're testifying on one another. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says Mishum Rabbi Shimon, and then Rabbi Shimon Ben Hasgan.
So he's Mino. He's a skan.
Right, that's true. Okay, Malim lekahuna pi Eid Echad. You can trust an Eid Echad. That is not clear at all how he is different than any of the three of the two opinions that preceded him. So again, you have Tanna Kama that says you can do it even in a case where there might be collusion. You have Rabbi Eliezer that says you cannot do it if a concrete challenge has been raised, and the Gemara will say he does not. He might not agree either in the case of possible collusion. It might only be when one person they're not testifying about one another. Rabbi Yehuda says you do not trust an Eid Echad for this, and we don't know. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says also that you do, that like the first two opinions you do, but not clear how if you say
Rabbi
well, the name Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Hasgan. Anyway, that, but it's not clear how he differs from either of the first two opinions. Yes, Michael.
So you may have discussed this before I came in, but when we say about Ne'emanu, is this more for or only for Mamonos kind of things? So
the Gemara is going to,
because let's say he wants to get up in Duchen. I mean,
all right, so excellent. So that's going to be most of today's daf. Yes.
Why don't you read the Mishnah of Rabbi Elazar clarifying Rabbi Yehuda?
It could be. The Gemara actually discusses when somebody says "ematai," is he lachlok, or is it coming to clarify or to disagree? Could be, but Rabbi Yehuda sounds more categorical. So Rabbi Eliezer might be trying to contextualize and limit Rabbi Yehuda, but it sounds like that Rabbi Yehuda was a broader statement. The Gemara sees it as debate. It could be he's claiming that's what Rabbi Yehuda meant, but it's not so pashut that is what Rabbi Yehuda meant. Okay, let's look at the Gemara. Kol hani lamali. Why do I need all of these? All of these means all of the Mishnayot that we just had over the last few days about Peshas or Peshahitir. Okay, so why do I need all of them? Of course, these last two are not Peshas or Peshahitir. They're just about Ne'emanus without a Peshasar. You know, the last two are particularly a new Chiddush about being trusted in Eid Echad, about Shvuya and trusting in Eid Echad, about Kohen. But anyway, but there seems to be a lot of repetition. Why do I need all of these? So the Tana Mode Rabbi Yehoshua, if it had the first case of the parak, where Rabbi Yehoshua agrees in the case of the guy says that this field was your father's and I bought it from you, and therefore that's a Pesha Asar, and we believe the guy, Mishum Dika Drar de Mamona, because there is a Drara de Mamona. What does the word Drara mean? Rashi says Drara means a loss of money. Tosfos says it means you have a connection to money. So the way Tosfos explains this is easier, that if the guy is already on the field, he's been working on the field, and he says, this field that I'm on, it used to be your father's and I bought it. So it's not such a big chiddush that we say Pesha Asar. You're already in possession of the field, right? So so that's more easy that we would say Pesha Asar as opposed to other cases where that might not be the case. Okay, Rashi says Drada Mamoni here means that if you were lying, he would lose the field. So therefore, it's much clearer that when he says the field was your father's, that the second part of the statement, but I bought it from him, is part of the same statement. Because Rashi and Tosfos, in many of these scenarios, the Gemara never said it explicitly, but say the Pesha Asar has to be like the same statement. Maybe even the two parts have to be Toch Kidei Dibur of one another. So for Rashi, part of the Chiddush, right? Because otherwise it's like that. No, we believed when you said it was field 10 days ago. Now we're not going to believe you when you say you bought it from, you bought it from the father. So it has to be, if it has to be the same statement, Rashi says that maybe that's the point, that if I know the first half of the statement is going to make me lose money, then there's no question that the end of the sentence was meant to qualify it to be part of the first part of the sentence. But you might not always say that. Sometimes you might be more inclined to see them as two different statements. But here, where money's at stake, clearly it's all one statement. That's the way. Well, that's the debate. That is the debate. Nobody knows. It probably means more of a connection to money. But Rashi says it means a loss of money.
The Rashi says muchsak basadeh. So it sounds like it's like from diur, like he's like literally.
No, because Drar de Mamon is not used just by real estate. Drar de Mamon is a common phrase that's used.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, it means there's a debate whether it means shaychus mammon or hefsed mammon. Okay. Anyway, but so that's what Rashi says. So again, what Rashi is important to make us realize that part of a thing that the Gemara never was explicit about Pesha Asar is what are the parameters of seeing it as a same statement, and therefore Rashi emphasizes that because there's money at stake, it's clearly meant to end his statement, and it's the same statement. Tosfos again says the simpler point that he's on the field, so obviously we're more prepared to believe him. So that was the case, the easier case about being on the field and saying it was your father's and I bought it from him. Okay, in the case of witnesses that are saying, this is our signature, but we were Ketanim, we were Anusim, we were Krovim, so you don't have any of these things. It's not like the money is in the possession of the person they want, right? That may be testifying to a document of a loan. So the money actually has to change hands, number one. And number two, or we'll actually forget that because anyway, the point is they are not in possession of the money that they own. And number two, they are not the ones who are at stake of losing money. So aim a low, maybe you wouldn't say Peshasar in that case. Okay, so that's why you needed the case of the Eidim. The Itana Eidim, if it just said the Peshasar case in the case of Eidim, Mishum de la Alma, I'm more prepared to believe the second part of their statement because they're helping somebody else. Okay, they're helping the Love. But if he says, this was your father's field and I purchased it for myself, to Lenavshe, that the second part of the statement is coming up himself, aim alone, maybe I wouldn't believe him. So that's why I needed both the case of the field and the case of the witnesses. As Tosfos points out, if you remember, the case of the witnesses, there were a lot of chidushim as well, that you might say that once they triggered the validity of the star in the first half of their statement, they're not believed to make the second part of their statement because now they're going up against the star. So you needed those two things, the case of witnesses with the star and the case of the guy believed that the field, that he purchased the field. V'yashmin and top of Chaftal Amdalef. V'yashmin and Hanitarti, he had it said those two, Mishum de Mamona. Okay, we said Pesha Asar by monetary issues. A woman who says that she was married and then divorced, where there's a whole question about a real, status of Isser and Heter to Isura, and it's a very weighty Isser. Aim alone, maybe we wouldn't believe the second part of the statement. Okay, so that's when the woman says, I was married and got divorced. Why do I need the second part of the Mishnah that we did yesterday or 2 days ago, where she says, I was captive and I was not raped, right? If your woman is believed that she was divorced, which is a more weighty issur, certainly she should believe that she was not raped. Okay, so Mishum, the Kabbalah Misni, Vini Shenises Boedim, Hare Zola Teitse. You're right. We don't need to tell you Pesha Asar there, but what we do need to tell you is that she can stay married to the second guy if the witnesses that she was captive came after she married, or the Kohen, after she had married the Kohen. Okay, and therefore we need to tell you the case about captive. In
the case of potential rape.
Potential rape. Right. She married the Kohen, and then witnesses came that said that she had been captive. No, not that she had been raped. Then we would make her get divorced. Okay, then there'd be concrete evidence of that. The witnesses said that she had been taken captive, so you no longer can apply Pesha Asar. Then she's no longer believed to say she had been raped. Right, exactly. So she got married, and then witnesses came and said she was captive. You lose the Pesha Asar, and nevertheless, we don't make you get divorced. That's good, according to the one that says that we only don't force a divorce in the case about captivity. So we had to discuss the captivity case. But remember, there was one who said that even in the case where witnesses said she had been married, and now there's no evidence that she had been divorced. There's no pesha, there's no evidence, and nevertheless, we don't make her leave her second husband, which is a huge chiddush, right? And we only said it's because chazaka einisha miza peneh and so on. Okay, but there is an opinion that says that even when she says I was married and divorced and got married on the basis of it to a second guy, and then witnesses said she had been married, so now there's testimony she'd been married and no evidence of divorce. We let her stay married. So if that's true, so why do we need the case about being captive at all? We've already said the big chiddush that you say pesha asar about her being divorced, which is a much bigger halachic, weighty halachic status than the question of being raped. And you say that we what do you call it? And you say that you even let her stay married to the second guy, even if witnesses said that she had been already married, if that came after she had married the second guy. So the divorce case is obvious. The case of captivity is obvious. Why do you need it?
It's just a dat yachid, though. No, I mean, how does that?
Two ways of reading the Mishnah. So if you read the Mishnah that way, the Mishnah says, Im Shabo Eidim, she can stay married.
According to that read, why would you?
Exactly. Why do you need at all the case of captivity? Okay. The case of marriage is the bigger chiddush that you say Pesach Asar, and the bigger chiddush that you let her stay married. Okay. So the Gemara says, no. Nishum, the Kabbalah Mishnah Shtei Nashim Shenishpu, because we wanted to get to the Mishnah we read yesterday that talked about believing women who were both taken captive about one another, okay? And therefore, we wanted to introduce the case of captivity. You're right. In terms of Pesha Asar, captivity was not a chiddush. But we wanted to introduce the case of captivity to get to the case of forget Pesha Asar. One woman is believed, two women who are captive are believed on one another, which tells you the idea, number one, that you believe in Eid Echad relating to these captivity issues, and number two, and a woman, and number three, that you even believe it if there's a concern of collusion, which is now the Gemara's next point. Okay, so v'shtei nashim shenishbu lamali. What's the chiddush? So it doesn't just say the chiddush is you believe in Eid Echad and a woman. Actually, we're going to have a Mishnah later that says that about believing in Eid Echad by cases of captivity. So what's the unique chiddush of the case of the two women? The ma'od tema nechush legomlin, because I might say let's be concerned about gomlin. Gomlin here means reciprocity. I'll say that you weren't raped if you say that I wasn't raped. Okay, so when they're both saying it about one another, it's a bigger chiddush than just believing in Eid Echad. So Kamash Malan, that we're not concerned about that. That's why you needed the case about the two women testifying on one another. Okay, why do I need the Mishnah we just read about the two men about the Kohen? Again, I could say the chiddush is that you believe in Eid Echad, that somebody is a Kohen. That's also a chiddush, at least. So the Gemara says, because we see there's a debate about a Kohen. Rabbi Yehuda says that even if you believe, let's say, about the issue of captivity, you don't necessarily believe about somebody being a Kohen. Why would it be different? So the easiest answer is that the issue of captivity is a shvuya, it's a suffix. So principle is that b'shvuya hikilu. Rabbis were lenient around this issue about a woman taken captive, and they were more prepared to believe that she was okay. Okay, so that's one reason why Rabbi Yehuda might be more strict by the case of Cohen than shvuya. The other reason, as we're going to see in a few minutes, is that once you start allowing a Kohen to eat truma, okay, that's an isser. But you know what? I mean, a woman who is raped is also an isser to marry a Kohen. So you could say truma is a chiyuv misa. Maybe it's more weighty that reason. But the other reason the Gemara is going to explicitly address is that if you start letting a Kohen eat truma, then people will think he's a Kohen, and then they'll allow him to do other things. And in terms of marriage issues, they'll believe he's a Kohen, and so on and so forth. So Kohen is more consequential in other areas. So
restrictions.
Yes, that's true. But the Gemara is also going to talk about dafka marrying miyuchasot and whatever. That's true. It's also about duchening. We'll see all that. But anyway, by a Kohen, there's going to be a sort of ripple effect of doing this, and therefore we want to be, more. We might be more concerned. Okay, so yes, we believe Eid Echad both by Shvuya and by Kohen. We're not concerned about Gomlin, but nevertheless by Kohen there are special issues. Again, maybe because we're particularly lenient by Shvuya, maybe because by Kohen there's also this issue about how do we take the fact that he's eating truma, and then it might get translated into other things as well. Yes,
why am I bringing in the other stuff from Brooklyn before, like she says Mukat eights and all that kind of thing.
Well, this is
also almost.
Well, that wasn't a Pesha Asr case, right? I mean, so we're within the Pesha Asr categories, and we're within the believing of the Eid Echad about somebody else. I mean, yeah, those were interesting too, but those were just not the same theme that we're talking about. Yeah.
There was once. Do you remember that you laid out once a paradigm?
That was Migo, not Pesha Asr. Yeah.
Do you remember there was once a time you laid out a paradigm, different types of Isurim? There was one Isur that was more chamor than another, but another that had more ramifications in different areas. And there was like
what are you talking about, like Isser Kolel and Isser Mosif?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's about Isser Chal Isser. Yeah. So that's not exactly comparable, but yes. But but it is always important to think about like what are the difference. Which one is more weightier.
Application, like so with the Kohen and the Trua, because there are more applications.
Right.
It's more Kolel.
Right. It's also So again, that's a specific technical issues that are used in terms of the question of Isser Chal Isser. But yes, that is always a question, right? What's the scope of it? All right. So let's take a look. Now we're going to get exactly to this issue about the Kohen. Tana Rabbanan. Ani Kohen v'chaverai Kohen. Okay, I'm a Kohen and my friend is a Kohen. So now the original Tosefta is clearer. The original Tosefta is Ani Kohen v'chaverai Kohen, and the other person says Ani Kohen v'chaverai Kohen. Okay, so basically it becomes a case like our Mishnah, where what you say about yourself, we don't care, we don't trust you, but each one is testifying about the other guy. Okay, so it's basically the case of the Mishnah. All right, so let's see. This is now a restating of the case of the Mishnah. Neman lachilo b'truma, you can feed the guy that he's testifying about truma. The enu neman lahasio isha. Okay, and here becomes the implication about what the consequences of a Kohen. You cannot marry a woman to him. We'll discuss. I'll discuss that in a minute. Achu gimel, unless there are three people there, not just two. Shnayim mi'idim al zeh, v'shnayim mi'idim al zeh. So it's sort of like when you would go around and you do the heter nadar. Yeah, exactly. So first you have two testify one, and then the other two testify on the other. So anyway, you need two witnesses to marry him off a woman. Now, what's the concern of marrying him off a woman? Why, as Joe pointed out, if he's a Kohen, actually restricts the women that he can marry. So Rashi says it just means because as we've seen before, Kohanim would be very careful to marry only, women from a very good yichus. So here's this woman from this very good family, from this really good yichus. She came over on the Mayflower, and and she came over with Yoshua ben Nun, and exactly with Ezra, and so she is going to want a high degree of evidence. Those families are going to want higher standard of proof that this guy's a real Kohen before I let my daughter marry him. So it's actually interesting because then it's not even so much halachically, it's more like societally, but we've seen that before, that there's all this concern around yichus and so on. So, okay, the practice that has been adopted is that we're going to demand a higher level before we do this, even though there's very little halachic consequence involved. That's one approach. The other approach is that we're concerned that maybe if we don't know his status, besides the question of whether he's a Kohen or not, forget about being a Kohen, maybe he's a mamzer. So if we don't know what somebody's background is. So that's what we believe in. We believe in not just that he's a Kohen, but we believe in that he's not a mamzer or anything like that. Of course, there's a huge Tosfos here. The reason our daf is so small is because there's a lot of discussion in Tosfos. So there's a huge Tosfos that says we don't assume people are mamzerim, even if we don't know their prior status. So he doesn't buy that as the reason. Okay, so then Tosfos finally says the real issue is about whether we would have to about what we believe that his kid will be. Like, are we going to Lasio Isha really means, because when you check about who's the woman that you have marry a Kohen, it's not just good yichus. You want to check that the woman is not a chalola. So saying that we're going to check the woman to marry him, right? Because then the halal, the kids will be halalim, won't be considered kohanim. So what it means is, if we're saying we're checking to make sure the woman that he's going to marry, it means we're going to be concerned about whether his kids are halalim. So it's really just a code word for saying, are we going to assume whether his kids are halalim or not? Now, of course, the funny thing is, I don't get it. If you're prepared to let him eat truma, then how is it different than, why should you be concerned that his kids are halalim? I mean, if he can eat truma, his kids can eat truma. So Tosfos says, okay, really, it's not about truma. Really, what we're saying is very convoluted because it's about the Gemara. Anyway, he says, really, it's about saying, can we let him work in the Beis HaMikdash? So I don't know how he gets that from Hasio Isha, but again, it's very funny because this is the question Dov said. So he's a Kohen, why is that? Why does that allow him to marry certain types of women? It should restrict him from marrying certain types of women. So again, the best two answers are either what Rashi says, that it's a more societal thing, that miyuchas families wouldn't want to marry their daughter off to him unless they could prove with better proof that he's a Kohen, or Tosfos rereads it to say it's really a question of, do we let him work in the Beis HaMikdash, which is obviously a much more weighty issue than Truma.
So according to the marrying thing, so we're more Mekel on Truma. I guess it's Truma Drabanan or something like that.
Well, we'll see. But even if it's Truma D'Oraisa, still, where you work in the Beis HaMikdash, you're Machal the Avoda.
No, I'm not talking about that makes more sense. But like, okay, well, let me try. Oh, no, I can't let you marry my daughter.
Right. That's true, because it's not a halachic point. It's a societal point. Families with good yichus. I don't care what you and your halacha says. You're not marrying my daughter unless you can prove it. Okay. Anyway, so all right. So anyway, okay. So okay. So anyway, there's a difference between truma and yuchsin, or marrying a woman, getting married. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, now Rabbi Yehuda, as we know in the Mishnah, is not prepared to believe the Kohen on one another. No, even for truma, you're not believed. Until there are three. Okay, so fine. So we basically, in addition to introducing the idea that it doesn't work for marriage, we basically just repeated the idea that Rabbi Yehuda does not believe the Kohanim to be made on one another. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to ask a question which is both on this Breita and on our Mishnah, that Rabbi Yehuda is stricter than the Chachamim and not prepared to believe. L'meimad Rabbi Yehuda chayesh l'gomlin. It seems like Rabbi Yehuda is concerned, minimally he's concerned about issues of collusion and reciprocity. Right? Maybe he doesn't believe in Eid Echad at all, about a Kohen status, but minimally he doesn't believe this case where there are two and they're testifying about one another. Rabbanan lo chayesh l'gomlin, and the rabbis are not concerned about reciprocity. But we've heard the opposite, that none. So you have donkey drivers that entered into a city, and basically they're not donkey drivers, they're also like, it means they're carrying their loads on their donkey. They're merchants that go from city to city. And one of them says, my grain is new grain, his is old grain. Shali Eino Mitukan, my grain is not fixed for Trumas and Maisus, meaning it's Tevel. V'shel Chaverai Mitukan, and his has been taken Trumas and Maisus. So he's basically saying his friend's grain is better than his. Okay, so he's testifying about his friend. Now, what is the idea of Chadash and Yashan? So the most obvious thing to say is that, similar to the Trumas and Maisus issue, it means old grain from before the Omer, new grain after the Omer. Okay, and that he's saying that actually my grain is usher to eat until Pesach. Okay, my friend's grain is old and it's good. However, the problem is that the Gemara in a minute is going to say that we're dealing with the Rabbanan issues here, not the Oraisa. So that leads basically, so that's another big Tosfos, figuring out what Chadash and Yashan is. Does it have to do with Shemitah issues? At the end of the day, Anyway, at the end of the day, Tosfos and Rashi both say that the Chadash and Yashan is not about the kosher status of the grain. It's just in general saying bad stuff about his. My friend has nice old dried grain, which apparently is better, like old wine is better. It's dried out. Mine is fresher and it still hasn't been dried out. Okay, which is worse. So basically, he's saying the Mitukan is clearly the halachic issue about Trumas and Maisus. So basically, he's saying all good stuff about his friend. His grain is better. It's whatever. It's it's Trumas and Maisus. Mine is bad, and so on. Okay, that's the story. So can we believe Can we believe one guy about the other? Of course, the problem of collusion here is not like right now they're testifying about one another, but in this city, right, you say this, and in the next city we switch, and you say the same thing about me. Okay,
so everyone gets to sell their
grain. Exactly. So that's the question. Do we believe them? It's a good deal, right? Yeah. Okay, so I have to tell the joke, which is all right, which is so outside of Vatican City, you've heard me tell this joke. You have the two guys, right? So one of them is like this Jew with the scraggly beard and like in short torn clothing and looking like miserable, and then with his like tzedakah box out, and then there's that person like priestly, garments, the collar, big gold cross, very refined, dignified, and everybody walks out of Vatican City. They like spit at the Jew and they put like $5, $10, $20, into the priest's, charity box. So finally, somebody comes over to the Jew and he says, listen, buddy, he says, you're not doing yourself any favors. Listen, why don't you just leave here, go to, the Jewish quarter, go to your own people, and the people will take care of you. They'll provide for you over there. So he looks up to the priest and he says, Chaim, look who's telling us how to do business. So there you go. That is a perfect application of COVID. All right.
Based on Ketuvot.
Exactly. That is the joke for today's stuff. All right. Exactly. Anyway, so are we concerned about that? Okay. So anyway, all right. So the Gemara says like this. So Eino Ne'eman, he's not believed because we're afraid there's a whole collusion going on here. Reb Yehuda Omer Ne'eman, he is believed. Okay, so here Reb Yehuda is prepared to believe one guy about the other, and in our Mishnah not. So everybody's reversing their position.
What are we supposed to do? Just be eating with them all the time? Like,
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. How do we do it nowadays? I don't know. I'm a Rav Barava. I'm a Rav. You develop a reputation. I don't know. Muchlev Ashita. Okay, you're right. It's reversed because the names got mixed up, which is a very reasonable position. So fine. So Rabbi Yehuda should be the one to say Eino Ne'eman, and the Chachamim should be the one to say Ne'eman. No, let's not reverse it. Let's try to understand how the cases might be different. The case there to say that the grain has had Trumas and Meisers taken, even if we wouldn't say that, we wouldn't believe them. What's the status of grain that you buy from an Am Haaretz? It's Demai. Because we anyway think that most likely the Am Haaretz did take Trumas and Meisers. It's just rabbinically we don't believe it. So since rabbinically we don't believe it, it's sort of like Shvuya. Right, Rabbi Yehuda didn't have a problem about believing the woman by the case of Shvuya Hikilu. So Demai Hikilu. Okay, so yeah, they're lenient in that case because the only thing at stake there is the status of Demai, which is only a rabbinic concern. Okay, so the Gemara is going to ask that. So Rov Amayarts Masrinain, most Amayarts take Maser, so therefore it's only a rabbinic concern. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda is willing to believe in that case. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Rabbi Yehuda, Kasha, Rabbanan, Lo Kasha. Okay, what you think only Rabbi Yehuda is contradiction of his two positions, and the rabbis are not the problem about them contradicting what they said earlier? So Rabbi Yehuda here is more lenient, and you've explained why he's more lenient because it's Demai. But why are the rabbis more strict? In our Mishnah, the rabbis are prepared to believe about a Kohen, and here they're not prepared to believe that the grain is okay. So the Gemara says, Ela Rabbi Yehuda lo kasha k'deshanina. Rabbi Yehuda isn't the problem, like we said. He's more lenient in this case about the Demai. That's only rabbinic, and we're lenient. How about the rabbis? Why are they more strict about the grain case? Rabbanan lo kasha k'damar Rabbi Chamer bar Ukva b'sheklei naso biyado. Like Rabbi Chamer bar Ukva says, when he has the instruments of his profession in his hand. Hachanami b'sheklei naso biyado. Here too, he's got the instruments of the profession in his hand. What does that mean? So what Rashi says it means is that if the other guy who is testifying that my friend's grain is the best, if basically he's got out all of his equipment, like his scales and his cash register and the whole thing, it's very clear that he's planning on selling his grain in the next city. So therefore, we're concerned about this whole reciprocity. Whereas, if basically all of his stuff is packed up, and then we won't assume that he's planning on selling his stuff in the next city, and therefore we'll be prepared to believe him about his friend. Okay, which is a little bit funny because in the case of the Kohen, they're both showing up and want truma. That should just like be kleim naso biyado. It's clear that they both want to, that they're both going to benefit from the testimony. It's not exactly clear why that makes it any, any more of a basis of suspicion than the case of the Kohen. Tosfos says kleim naso biyado is in the opposite case. Why we do believe in the case of the Kohen, because basically the Kohen has out the type of vessels that are things that would, that are particularly kept as tahor vessels and other types of things that sort of signify, like, and give us, indications that, oh, this person is probably a Kohen. Look, he's got all that kahuna apparatus, that he's dealing with. So anyway, there's some type of special circumstances, not clear in which case that's being said about. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Vehecha itmad Rabbi Chamer bar Ukva. Where was the statement of Rabbi Chamer bar Ukva originally said? That which we taught. Hakadar sheiniach derotav. So you have the person who sells jugs, okay, and he basically leaves his jugs and his his pictures. And he went down to get a drink of water. Okay, and the point is here is that the question is, did the Amei Haaretz touch them and make them tameh? Okay, and he left. He abandoned them for a few minutes to go get a drink of water. Okay, Hapnimioto wrote the ones that are innermost, which are not sort of exposed to the street and where people are passing by, are tahor. You're not afraid that people touch them. Note the outermost ones, which are where people could encounter them. Tmeot, you're tameh because maybe they walked by and rubbed against them or touched them or whatever it was. V'hatanya, but didn't we teach in a Braita elu ve'elu tmeot that everything is tameh, even the innermost ones? So Amar Rabbi Chamer bar Ukva, so b'chsheklei umnato biyado, when his instruments of his profession are in his hand. What does that mean? It means that when the thing is set up and the jugs are laid down, and basically there's a cash register there, and there's a sign of for sale, so then we're afraid that people are going to be inspecting them and looking at them, and they're looking at even the ones that are in the back. Sometimes you go into the store and you can't find what you're looking for, and you keep on looking, and maybe there's your right size or whatever, somewhere in the back. Okay, so if it's clearly open for sale, open for business, then he has to be concerned that they touched even the innermost ones. Otherwise, like the guy hasn't opened his store yet, so you only have to be concerned about the outermost ones. 1 minute, let's take a look. Well, it's tough. You got to be concerned about Dmai and about Tuma and the whole thing. It was a very difficult life.
Chavarim can go in. It's sort of
exactly. I'm already okay, where was it? Okay, because once the store is open and the instruments of the profession are out, then everybody's going to look at them. Tatanya, but we have a third Braita that says the other possibility. Everything is tahor. Okay, when the store isn't open for business and his instruments aren't in his hand. Okay, but what's the middle case? So if the store is open, everything is tameh, and if the store is closed, everything is tahor. What's the case where the outer ones are tameh and the inner ones are tahor?
I thought that the stuff was down by the river.
It's not clear where they are, but yeah, you set up a shop near the river. Okay, you got your, you laid out all your vessels. Yeah, but doesn't mean
the shop.
It means those guys who sell coffee on the street or whatever. Those guys who sell the books on the street. They have a table. They have all their books out. Okay. That's the guy. He laid out all of his. His things, and then he left for 5 minutes to go use a bathroom. Okay, so do you start looking at the books or not? Is it clear that he's already he's set up for business?
Really, right? Maybe opened his store and and it has
But maybe he hasn't. They got they got that plastic tarp, right? So let's say he hasn't removed the plastic tarp yet, or he's half removed it. You don't start looking until the guy's open for business. I would totally be looking at the books. Okay, fine. Anyway, all right. Okay, so so what's the case that the outer ones we're afraid of and the inner ones are still tahor? Okay, because it's right at the edge of Rishus Harabim. So even though it's not yet open for business, it's right there. The outer ones are right there, lined up against Rishus Harabim, and because of the rubbing of Rishus Harabim, people walk by it, and even if they know the guy isn't open for business yet, and they're not going to consciously pick it up and look at them, but they're going to touch them inadvertently, and therefore that's a problem. Okay, that was all a bit of a digression. Okay, back to our debate of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan, which is why do their positions reverse themselves between the Kohen and the case about the grain? So this doesn't explain why the rabbis are going to be more strict by the grain case, but it will explain why Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient. Why Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient by the grain, but let me say it the other way. Why Rabbi Yehuda is more strict by the Kohen? Why is it that we find this strictness in our Mishnah regarding the Kohen that we don't find elsewhere? And even Rabbi Yehuda is lenient in the case of grain, and he's strict in this case. So the reason is because the Kohen presents special circumstances, special issues, concerns. The case of the Kohen is that if you let him eat truma, which maybe we'd be prepared to do, you're going to now assume that he's like a miyuchas Kohen. Okay, and then again, so big deal. Assume he's miyuchas Kohen. So that might be the issue we dealt with yesterday under Amud Aleph, that families don't want to marry off their daughter to him and whatever, and we're protecting families' yichus. Okay, not such a halachic issue, but preferring families' yichus. Or again, as Tosa says, once you're assuming yuchsin and he can marry the chashuva families, you're also going to assume he's going for all matters, even for working in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so it's the same issue we dealt with before. So we saw that there was a higher standard for yuchsin, whatever its implications are. So maybe if there's a higher standard for yuchsin, that's exactly why we're not going to believe him for truma. Because once you believe him for one thing, it's going to be a slippery. Then people are going to translate it into the other thing. Okay,
So this more lenient.
Okay, but this builds on what we introduced in the Amud Aleph. On the Amud Aleph, we introduced that Yuchsin has a higher standard. So now we understand why there might be an issue about Truma. If everybody agrees Yuchsin has a higher standard, I might have to be forced to apply that to Truma. If once I believe somebody about Truma, people are going to translate it for the other purpose as well.
Yeah, you couldn't claim that it had a higher standard and still allow the Truma. You couldn't possibly have that position, right?
Well, you can. That's the Chachamim. The Chachamim say that Yuchsin has a higher standard. We allow him to eat Truma with an Eid Echad, and we're not afraid that people will just say, just because he's eating Truma, it's definite that he's a Kohen even for Yichus purposes. Well, now you understand it's reasonable, the issue about us translating one to the next. It's okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so that's why the Kohen is special. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this: Ibailu, ma'u lahalos mishtaras liyuchsin. So we've introduced that there's a debate of if somebody eats truma, can we assume? Now, by the way, I actually misstated it a little bit. It's not just a question about are we afraid that people will translate one to the other. You know, there's always a question about like which comes first, the societal norms or the halacha, which sort of shapes the other. But the phrase of ma'u mitruma liyuchsin means, right, are we halachically going to take the position that if somebody eats truma, therefore he's good for yichus purposes as well. So if you say halachically we take that position, then therefore we can't trust a guy for truma unless he satisfies the status of yichus, because we have halachically adopted the position that if he's eating truma, that's also good for yuchsin purposes. Okay, that's lo mali mitruma yuchsin. The other position says mali mitruma yuchsin means we are prepared to say if he's eating truma halachically, that means it's good for yichus. So because we're going to halachically say translate one to the other, therefore we won't allow somebody to be believed for truma unless we are prepared to believe.
Where does like come into this?
We'll get to that. Okay. So again, mali mitruma liyuchsin means halachically we will translate one to the other, and therefore we have to apply the same standard for both. Ein malin means halachically we will not translate one to the other, and therefore we're allowed to apply different standards for the two of them. Okay. So now the Gemara says like this: Ibailu, they raised the question. Ma'u lahalos mishtaras liyuchsin. If you have a star that has somebody's name in it and identifies him as a Kohen, okay, can you treat that as strong enough evidence to allow the guy for yichus purposes?
So wait, they say he's so Kohen.
Well, the Gemara is going to clarify what it says, so let's read it. Okay, but the basic point is, if somebody's name appears in a document and he's identified as a Kohen, is that considered testimony and even good for Yuchsin? Because now we've established again that Yuchsin is the highest standard. So Heichi Dami, what's the case? If he's the guy that's one of the Eidim and says, Ruvain ben Aaron HaKohen, right, Eid. So then the Gemara says, why would that be good testimony for, he's just testifying about himself. So, man kamisaidi luye, who's testifying about him? He's just testifying about himself. How could that serve as evidence that he's a real Kohen? So it says, look, tzricha ksiv be ani ploni Kohen laviti mana mi ploni. I, Ruvain, the Kohen, borrowed money from Shimon. The Chasimu Sadi, and there are witnesses signing on the bottom. So the witnesses are signing on the bottom of a document in which somebody's identified as a Kohen. Does that mean that the witnesses are also testifying to the fact that he is a Kohen?
Probably not.
Okay, so that's
just find it alone.
So Amana Shebishtar Kamisahadi. Bottom line, the witnesses are not paying attention to making sure all the names are right. They're basically testifying to the fact that the loan took place, and they should not be interpreted to understand to testify to other things that are not, central to the actual case at hand. Or maybe that once witnesses their signatures are on the bottom, they're testifying to all aspects of the documents. It's a good question. So one says if you have a document and somebody's identified in it as an aid and it's signed at the bottom, as a Kohen, you can assume that the guy is a Kohen even for the higher standard of Yochsin. The Chadamar Ein Malin, and the other says you cannot. Okay. Ibailu. So that was one question. Going from documents. By the way, since we're learning Ksuvas, it's very relevant because a whole issue of the Ksuva, there's a lot of hakapad in the Ksuva because bottom line is, how many people are using the Ksuva for real dini mamanis types of purposes as was intended, but there's an issue about if a woman is a grusha or a gioret, to be careful to either say that explicitly or indicate that, not just because then it's a difference of 100 or 200, but because then you have a document that is stating her personal status, and that would be a personal status that would be relevant for other halachot, like marrying a Kohen. So a lot of people just do matrachta, which means gioret, as opposed to betulta, or say giorta. There's other ways to subtly indicate it if there's sensitivity around that. Divorce is matrachta, and a gior is giorta.
Don't read it out loud.
Or you don't read it out loud, right? often the groom is identified as a Kohen if he is a Kohen, but we don't have to. But anyway, that issue about what you assume based on written documents is an important question. So that's one issue about assuming Yuchsin, which we know is the highest standard based on written documents. Now we have another question. There is a question. If somebody is duchening, is that good to base it on as evidence for the higher standard of the marriage issue? Okay, so the Gemara says, and this we could ask this question: whatever your position is about whether we translate eating truma regard to yochsin, the duchening could be different than eating truma. Why is that? Right? Well, right, but okay, let's take a look. Yeah, but that's true. So even according to the one that says that if he's eating truma, we can assume he's a kohen even for the higher standard. Maybe nesias kapayim is different. Why? Truma. The Avon Misahi, because Truman is a very weighty thing. If he's not a Kohen, he's Chayiv Misa if it's Truma Deoraisa. Avon Nesias Kabayim, if a non-Kohen does Duchening, so the Isra say, that's only a mitzvah say. Kosev Archles B'nei Yisrael, only Kohanim, you bless Yisrael, not others. So just because he's doing Duchening, he might be willing to be a non-Kohen or a questionable Kohen, and big deal, I'll Duchen. Okay, so therefore we can't assume that somebody who's Duchening is necessarily proven to our satisfaction that he's a Kohen. Low. So therefore, we cannot translate that into Yuchsin. Or do we say Losh? No. Even something like Nesias Kapayim, he wouldn't do it if he weren't a Kohen, and therefore, or the community wouldn't let him do it if he weren't a Kohen, and therefore, if he's doing it, it must be that's a high enough degree of proof for us.
And we just allow him to do it.
Tibai, that's always a question. How did he start doing it? But now he's been doing it, and that's the practice. So it's a combination of the fact that he's doing it and that society is allowing it that serves as the evidence in which we're trying to figure out, a status.
Is Duchening the same thing as an Aliyah? Is that the same idea?
Maybe. Not really, because at least here you have an Isra Say issue, so it has some weight to it. And then you could ask the question the opposite way. Even if you're not prepared to translate Truma to Yuchsin, you might be prepared to translate this. Why? Hani mili Truma. It means Achla Betzina, because that gets my point here about who's doing it and who's allowing it. Truma is eaten in private, so therefore, it's not like the community has recognized him as a Kohen and lets him eat Truma. He goes to 2 or 3 farmers who have a little compassion on him, and they give him Truma, even though they don't necessarily 100% believe. So the fact that he's eating Truma for his own Averos is a big deal, but it doesn't prove a sense of communal recognition that he's a Kohen. Okay, but duchening that happens in public, ilav kohenu, if he were not a kohen, so I've been trying to say the community wouldn't allow it. It's saying that a person wouldn't have the chutzpah to get up there in front of the whole community if it weren't actually true. Okay, so there's different factors we could look at to determine how good is the evidence that the person really is a Kohen. And again, recognizing that the highest standard is Yuchsin, and therefore how much, if he does other things that normally only a Kohen does, can that satisfy our high standards for the Yuchsin purpose?
Meaning a community, whatever you want to call it, display may be more weighty than a private Doraita.
Exactly, yeah. Okay.
Do you have anything to say about?
Oh, Diamaloshna. I'm sorry. Okay, just how to read those words, or maybe it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about the fact that eating truma, a non-Kohen truma, is a capital offense?
Well, it's misa b'dei shemayim, not at least in the court. Okay, I don't know. I don't have anything to say about that. Okay, fine. Now. Rav Chizur Rabbi Avina, so that's the question. Rav Chizur Rav Avina, Chad Amar Malin, you can translate from the Nesias Kapayim to Yochsin, but Chad Amar Ein Malin. No, halachically, we cannot assume just because he's duchening that he's a proven enough Kohen for Yochsin purposes. Amalei Rav Nachman by Yitzchak L'Rava. Ma'al halos min Nesias Kapayim. Did I just read that? Oh, no. Okay, but it's the same question. It's just now he's asking, as opposed to a general Ibaylahu, now we have to actually have one Amor asking the other. So, so what story? Can we or not? It's a debate of Rav Chizur and Rav Avina. So he says, fine. Hilchos Amai. That wasn't what I was asking. What's the halacha? Oh no, masnisa yadana. He says, look, what I know is a brisa. Okay, what's the brisa? At the time, we turn a brisa. Rabbi Yossi Omer. Gedola chazaka. Chazaka is very weighty. Because it says the following, and here's a statement in Ezra relating to the Kohanim that returned from the Gola, and a lot of them were intermarried. Kohanim, right? There's a whole problem therefore about certain Kohanim. They might not be halalim because their father might have been intermarried.
I mean, they might be.
Well, if their father they might be chalalim if their father did intermarry. And from the sons of the Kohanim, bnei Chavya ben Hakotz, bnei Barzilai, asher lakach mibnos Barzilai hagiladi isha, vayikaral shemam eila bikshu ksavam hamityachasim. So these Kohanim from this family looked for their document of yichus, right, for their document of genealogy. So, by the way, the whole idea of yuchsin and all of this, and we'll get even more of this concern in Kedushin. Thank you, Anolim. Anyway, in Kedushin, a whole parakah that deals with this stuff is these are concerns that go way back, right? Again, and they're deep societal concerns. So again, as we've been pointing out, it's not clear what the halachic weight about some of this stuff is, but obviously, families of yichus always want to, it's like America's a classless society, so we don't appreciate this as much. But I guess for people that watch, what's the show, Downton Abbey or whatever, you understand that, class makes a huge difference, and, you only marry within your class and so on. Anyway, but for Kohanim, it could be an issue of being a halal as well, or as we've been discussing. So let's take a look. Okay, so halal, or even a non-Jew if the mother wasn't Jewish. But anyway, okay, so these Kohanim, this is a pasuk. We're looking for their documentation of their genealogy, of their yichus. The lo nimtzu, and they could not produce it. Vayigalu min hakuna, vayigoalu min hakuna, Rashi says, and they were despised, they were rejected from the kuna. Vayoma hitrashta, and hitrashta says hitrashta is Nehemiah. Lahem asher lo yochlu mikodesh hakadashim. They cannot eat from the korbanot, from the holy of holies, understood to mean the korbanot. Ad emod kohen lurim v'tumim, until Mashiach comes, which is basically okay, guys. Until Mashiach comes and proves otherwise, you can't eat from because there was no urim v'tumim in the second base of it.
The pasuk is saying they're made Barzilai, which we know.
Yeah, but they don't know who was their mother. We don't know. There's all these questions about what happened in the Golas. Okay, so that's the pasuk. So now we're going to interpret. We're going to focus on the word Kodesh Kadashim. Amar lahem. So Nehemiah said to them, so you retained the status you had in exile. What were you eating in exile? In the kachim that were eaten outside of the Beis Mikdash, meaning truma. Avkan b'kachei gvul, fine, you can continue eating truma, but not kodesh hakadashim. It's focusing on the word kodesh hakadashim, not korbanot. Okay. So that's all very nice. What is that? So that's gedola chazaka. That the fact that you had been eating by truma, even though now we see that you can't produce any documentation, we're going to let you continue eating truma. That's the point of that price of gedola chazaka. Now, why is this relevant for us? So let's take a look. If you say that in general you can go from duchening to yuchsin, honey, even to parsi yadayu, these kohanim, right? If they continue to do what they were doing in the exile, when the exile they weren't just eating truma, they were actually also doing duchening. So presumably if we're saying gedola chazaka, they're going to continue to duchen now that they're back in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, but if we would say that from duchening you can go to yuchsin, but the whole problem here is that we're not going to fully prepare to embrace you as kohanim, and yuchsin is saying we're embracing you, and Nehemiah here is telling them you're not going to be embraced, you're not going to work in the Beis HaMikdash. So if they're going to duchen, they're going to raise them up to a full status of kohen, and they'll let them work in the Beis HaMikdash, and that was exactly the point that we were trying to avoid. So clearly, if he's letting them do what they used to do, right, then it must be that the duchening will not translate into yuchsin. So the Gemara says, no. Shani hacha dereyach chezkayu. No. Here it's different. Here everybody knows that their status has been put into question. Okay, the pasuk says they were from this family. Actually, Bnei Barzilai is a non-Kohen family. Anyway, Rashi says everyone knows their status in question because everybody knows they're not working the Beis HaMikdash. So this was special circumstances that there had been a stigma on the family. Okay, so there we're going to not be concerned. But in other cases, we will say that you can translate from one to the other. Okay, the Gemara says, if you don't say this was a special case, so you have the same question you just asked me if you translate from Truma to Yochsin, because it's clear that they continue to eat Truma, right? So if they continue to eat Truma, then we would say, oh, they're totally Miyuchas Karnim and they can work in the Beis HaMikdash, but that's what we were trying to avoid. So you're going to raise them up to the full status. Okay, the word asukinu is the parallel of the Hebrew ma'alim. Okay, it must be because their status has been stigmatized and thrown into question. So in this case, nobody's going to translate from one to the other. Let's read a few more lines. What's so great about the chazaka? Okay, if they were eating truma, they continue to eat truma. What's the big chiddush? Okay, it's not that we can. We're not going to translate the eating truma to anything else. So what's the chiddush of eating truma? So that's one of the they make kara echol b'truma d'Rabbanan and hasha echol b'truma d'oraisa. In Chutz La'aretz, the truma was only rabbinic truma. So the big chiddush is that we're not going to let you continue doing it, even though you're in Eretz Yisrael and you're going to come to eat truma d'oraisa. That is a big chiddush. Yeah, okay. Even though we have a whole question of your status. The By saying, if you want, I could tell you, Hatanami b'truma d'Rabbanan echol. Even in Eretz Yisrael, they don't eat rabbinic truma. What's the rabbinic truma in Eretz Yisrael? So Rashi says it's something that is not of like grain and oil and wine, like truma of peyrod is rabbinic. So we would only let them continue to eat rabbinic truma. Okay, b'truma d'oraisa lo echol, not biblical truma, because actually we shouldn't allow them if we have this big question. Okay, so v'chi maskina mitruma yuchsin, and this, by the way, answers our other question about how we won't translate from one to the other. When do we translate from eating truma to yuchsin? B'truma d'oraisa, but b'truma d'Rabbanan lo maskina, not by rabbinic truma. We only would do it by biblical, and therefore we were not concerned that they would come to give them full status, because we're only continuing to let them eat rabbinic truma. But if that's true, then we get back to our other question. So what's the chiddush? They were eating rabbinic truma, they continue to eat rabbinic truma. Okay, so and we're not afraid that therefore it's going to translate. But okay, but then what's look how powerful chazaka is. What's the big deal? So the Gemara says the big deal is the following: the afagav tiikal migzer mishum truma deoraisa logas rina. And eating rabbinic truma in Chutz La'aretz is not a big deal. It's a d'Rabbanan, but it won't lead to anything bad. But eating truma d'Rabbanan in Eretz Yisrael, you could say, hey, if I'm eating truma d'Rabbanan, I'll start eating truma d'oraisa. And nevertheless, we're not going to make that gezerah. Okay, so more on this tomorrow. Look at that. We got ahead and we ended early.
So practically, then, I still don't know what we say about if there's a coin that, we're looking for a coin in the morning minyan. Some guys, whoever it is, from out of town, staying over for Shabbat.